This happened to me just last Tuesday, and I can't stop thinking about it. I'll start this story by saying I'm a 30-year-old female who lives with my fiance and our 2 dogs. I have 2 huskies. My huskies are not guard dogs to save their life. They don't bark, nor do they howl. These dogs just love people so much. My brother-in-law and a few of my friends have walked in on multiple occasions, and the dogs don't ever seem to make a peep. Anyways, on to the actual story at hand. It's 8 p.m., it's dark out, and I'm home alone. My fiance had a hockey game. I'm in the bathroom with the door closed and the blow dryer going, so I can't really hear anything going on around me. That is, until I hear one of the dogs howl. I stop the blow dryer and listen, thinking that the dogs are fighting again. Then I hear a faint knock, and the dogs just start going crazy, barking and howling and jumping into the bay window so bad that I thought they'd break it. I'm just thinking to myself, what the heck is making them go so crazy like that? Maybe it's just a dog or a skunk. I decide to look out my bedroom window as it was the closest view to the front door for me. Well, lo and behold, there's 2 men in hoodies standing at the front door. They start knocking louder, and this time my 2-year-old husky jumps from the bay window to the front door and then starts growling and ramming his body into the door. Keep in mind, I'm watching all of this from my bedroom. As the dog jumps into the door, one of the men jumps back kind of startled, looks at the other guy, and they just walk away. I called my fiance to get home as soon as possible. I watched the 2 men in hoodies walk away down the road. They didn't appear to be selling anything as they didn't stop at any other houses. I was so creeped out, and I still am to this day. Thank goodness for my crazy dogs. I really have no idea what I would have done without them. I had recently moved to a new city where my sister and her husband lived as well. They were both out of state, and at the time I was home alone with their pit bull. A little history on the pit bull, just because it's relevant to the story. She happened to be a rescue puppy from a shelter and had a serious history with people of darker skin tones. I've never heard of this for dogs, and I'm not sure if the previous owners were abusive or what happened, but she couldn't be around people of darker skin tones without becoming extremely agitated. So I'm in our house alone taking a shower when I hear the door open, which is kind of strange because I know there should be no one else here. Quite naively, I must have left it unlocked. I hear the dog get up, start growling, and walk near the bathroom door as I open it to see who is there. I step out and see 2 large African American men standing in the doorway, entering our house and looking around. I'm immediately confused and I went to ask them who they were, because I didn't know if maybe they were friends of my sister's or her husband, when the pit bull starts growling and barking. She bounds towards them and looks positively vicious. The men look understandably terrified and run outside, slamming the door behind them. After locking all the doors and calling my sister, I find that they have no friends or acquaintances matching the men's descriptions, and she was pretty freaked out too. I still have no idea why they were there or what their intentions were, but it was definitely not fun being left shaking in a towel trying to collect my thoughts after that. I did call the landlord and the authorities, but we never heard anything back. So to the 2 random guys who broke into the house while I was taking a shower, consider yourself lucky. You could have very well became dog food that day. This happened in the early 2000s, and I was around 12 years old. My dad had passed away about 2 years before leaving my mom, sister, and myself. To help cope me with my father's passing, my mom took me to the animal shelter to pick out a dog, since having a large dog was something that I always wanted. In one of the cages was a small shepherd/husky huddled in the corner that I right away fell in love with. When this incident happened, he was only about a year old, 90 pounds, and my best friend. My mom worked nights, and my older sister, taking advantage that my mom wasn't home, would constantly leave me alone. I didn't really mind though because she couldn't be home to boss me around, since when she was home she would try to be mom, telling me what to do and when to go to bed. We lived in a small middle-class suburb with a low crime rate, and I wasn't really scared to be home alone. I was sitting in the living room playing video games, and I decided to get up and head to the kitchen to grab a drink. From the kitchen, I had a clear view through the back door, and I could see that the garage happened to be open. Thinking that I just left it open after putting my bike away, I headed out the door to close it. My dog was sleeping in the basement since he liked to lay on the cool floor during the summer months, and I didn't take him out with me. I step out the door and make it about 5 feet from it, when I noticed in the darkness a crouched shadow moving in the garage. I froze, trying to get my eyes to adjust to make out what the shadow was. It finally hit me when I saw the figure stand up and turn towards me. I was terrified, and I felt like I had been glued to the spot. I knew that this person could see me since the back porch light was shining above me. At that very moment, the figure started running towards me. I was too scared to move and let out more of a yelp than a scream, but that was all it took for my dog to hear, and the next thing I hear is him behind me and snarling and growling. I could make out it was a man, but I couldn't see his features when he then froze, seeing this 90-pound beast right behind me. He turned and ran for the back fence with my dog right behind him. The guy made it to the fence, and since it was only about 4 feet, he then hopped it right before my dog got to him. After the man got away, my dog came running back to me, and we went inside where I barricaded the doors. I don't know why, but I didn't call the cops, and I never told my mom or sister what happened. One thing that really bothered me was that he had to have known I was inside, since I had the lights on and the blinds were open as well. So why take the risk to hit a house when someone was clearly home? The next morning, after my mom was home, I went outside to finally close the garage, and I happened to notice that the guy had been going through my dad's toolbox. I locked up the garage, and I never told anyone about what happened. I walked my dog to McDonald's and got him a burger and ice cream cone for being my hero. I felt like he really deserved a good treat after that, and I have no idea what I would have done without him. Thank God for dogs. This happened a few weeks ago, and I'm still a bit shaken up by it. My husband and I like to go on long drives to the desert with our dog. We live right outside Las Vegas, and we're very fortunate to live in a city with abundant beautiful areas to stargaze or use a telescope. My husband just got one for his B-Day in October, so he was really excited to finally try it out. We drove our Kia up to a popular overlook, and he took out the telescope. He showed me a bunch of constellations, and we saw a shooting star. The dog sat in the car with the windows rolled down. My dog is a B word straight up. They weren't kidding when they named female dogs that. She's an American cattle dog, and she saved my butt more times than I can count. She's very protective of both me and her dad as well. Anyway, my husband had to pee, and he told me to wait in the car for him. So I got in and locked the door. Meanwhile, I'm just browsing Reddit when I hear gravel moving. Thinking it's my hubby, I then remark, "Well dang, that was fast." Suddenly my dog goes berserk. She's snarling and barking, so I turn around and there's a dude that's not my husband. This guy was an idiot. He made the mistake of putting his hand through an open window with a crazy 63-pound dog. She's got his hand now, so he's screaming. I'm screaming, and my husband is yelling as he runs towards us with his pants half on. The dog lets go of his arm as the guy takes off as I call the cops. My husband tries to chase after the guy, but he's about 6'3" and 280 pounds, and this guy was fast. Anyway, the cops finally show up and they tell us they'll look out for him, but to maybe stay away from that area at night. The cops in our town are a total joke. Our wonderful doggo got a cup of Dairy Queen that night. She really earned it. This happened several years ago. I'm a short, petite woman, and at the time I was in my mid-20s. I lived alone with my dog Blake in a small neighborhood of townhomes. My job required me to work out of the office in different areas of my community, hosting events and such, so it was pretty common for me to be able to stop by my house midday to let my dog out. For context, Blake was a Vizsla, but was quite tall and large for his breed, and all muscle. Blake was trained but independent, and not very well behaved whenever people would knock at the door. He also had a very intimidating bark. One summer day, I came home in the afternoon to let Blake out and grab a bite to eat. By the lack of cars, it looks like I might be the only person home in the neighborhood, with the exception of a guy in his 40s sitting in a termite spraying truck. I noticed him watch me as I walk in, and I get a really weird vibe from him. Not 5 minutes later, I get a knock at the front door. I hesitated but decided to answer. It was the termite guy. I normally held my dog back and made him chill, but this time I let Blake jump and bark all over the glass of the shut screen door. The termite guy was obviously surprised and looked at Blake for an uncomfortably long time before finally speaking. He asked if I had a screwdriver he could borrow. This seemed odd to me because 1. Why would he need one if he's just spraying the outside of homes for termites? 2. This really seems like something you'd already have in your company-owned work truck if it was something you really needed for your job. I should have just said no and shut the door, but I told him if he'd walk away I would set one on the front porch. Otherwise, if I opened the door, my dog would probably attack him. He walked off, and thinking I shouldn't be rude, I tossed the screwdriver outside the door. Well, he never came back to use it. I still wonder what might have happened if I hadn't had Blake there to intimidate him. So I don't really know what the creepy termite guy was up to, but I'm really glad I never found out. This happened about 2 weeks after I bought my first home in December of 2010. I was 22 years old, and this was the first time I had ever lived alone. About 9 to 10 days after moving in, I adopted a dog that my sister and mom saw at a local animal shelter. An abused breeding male Cocker Spaniel. He had matted hair down his spine and everywhere else, 12 pounds underweight and wormy. I named him Jack, and he's still sleeping next to me today as I type this. The house that I bought wasn't in the best neighborhood, but it backed up to an elementary school's playground and cameras faced my backyard. It was about a day or two before Christmas, so my office was closed and I was home. The way my home was set up, to the right of the fridge was a window looking out to my front porch, with my front door at a 90 from the window. This is where my kitchen table was. If you were in the middle of the kitchen and looked to the left, there was a second living room and side door with a half window. This was the only window that I hadn't installed blinds on. You couldn't see the kitchen table from the side door. So I'm sitting at the table looking through mail or something, and a shadow passes over my papers right in front of me. The blinds were closed, but if you were on my front porch and close to the window, your body would create a shadow. I don't know why, but I felt uneasy. No one should have been there. So I dropped off my stool to the ground and kinda peeked at the crack in the blinds. There were 2 men that I didn't know on my porch. One was really big, wearing a white t-shirt and jeans, but I never saw his face because he was facing my front door. The other was wearing a red baseball cap and a really baggy red shirt. Honestly, at first, I thought that they may have a legit reason to be there. I'd already had one guy looking for his dog before, but I hear the big one then say, "Dude, go around. Go out back." The red shirt guy walks away, and I lose sight of him. I leaned to my left and saw the red shirt guy come up to my side door. Alright, this is creeping me out now. Then suddenly they both start slamming their hands into both my front door and my side door, just pounding so hard that my little tiny house was shaking. That's when this sweet little underweight Cocker Spaniel that I hadn't even had for a week loses his ever-loving mind. He starts baring his teeth and runs directly at the side door because he can see the guy, just the loudest barking I've ever heard him do. Red shirt then yells, "Holy crap, dude, she's got a freaking dog!" and tears off running, with the big man following behind. I was so grateful to Jack. If he hadn't have been in there, those guys would have made it in for sure. It was an old little house built in '55 and still had single pane windows. I filed a report with the police, but I never heard anything back regarding the men, which was okay because to my knowledge, they never came back. I moved away 5 years later. Jack saved me that day. He's been treated like a prince ever since. But I think that he knew that I was his person from day one, and nobody was gonna mess with his human. So white and red shirt dude, don't come back, cause Jack is still here and he'll definitely tear you up. This happened a few years ago, but I've just now decided to post it. After moving out of my neighborhood, I realized just how nerving the experience actually was. A few years ago, I was living in a bit of a rundown apartment complex. The town was a safe, everyone knows everyone type of town, but if anything bad was to ever happen, it was always in my neighborhood. I also used to live alone. I'm a young female for context. One night, I was getting off at around 1 a.m. from my job at the animal hospital. This was a fairly normal shift for me. I'm just driving my tiny compact sedan and I pull into the cul-de-sac that leads into the entrance of my neighborhood. I see a large white suburban SUV parked in the circle. Now, that's not too unusual. That's usually where people go if they're meeting someone and they don't want to go all the way into the complex. But then it started following me. The windows were tinted so I couldn't see inside, and there's no lights in the parking lot of the complex. I pull into a spot across the street from my building, assuming and hoping that the SUV would continue to pass. I'm facing another building. Bad move. The SUV stops his car perpendicular to mine, completely blocking me in. Crap. I keep the car running with the lights off, and I get my phone out to call 911. There was no way I could get away. I had a brick wall in front of me, cars on either side, and this creep behind me. In order to get to my building, I would have to pass this car. I have never been this scared before in my life. I was a sitting duck waiting for some faceless monster to emerge from the SUV and attack me. Unfortunately, the combination of the long shift and my car charger recently breaking, my phone was dead. This was double crap. Then I hear my dog Tito growl from the back seat. I thank my lucky stars that I brought him to work with me today. He was so quiet this whole time that I almost forgot that I had him with me. For some context, my dog is a pit bull, Dalmatian, and Jack Russell mix. He was also quite feral before I got him. He's quite small, only about 35 pounds, but it's 35 pounds of muscle and extreme territorial behavior. Most people don't really realize how small he is until he's right next to them. At this point, the SUV has had me blocked in for about 5 minutes. He sits up, knowing something is wrong, and begins barking, snarling, and attacking the back of the window. Now, for a small dog, he has an extremely loud and very powerful bark. No one had gotten out of the SUV yet, but Tito is chomping at the bit to get his teeth into whoever was inside. At this point, the SUV books it, pulls a U-turn, and drives right past me. It then sits at the entrance where it was before, facing my car. I wait around another 5 minutes before the car turns around and drives out of the neighborhood, totally out of sight. I sprint into my apartment with Tito in tow and lock the door right behind me. I didn't sleep that night. I hated that neighborhood. I never felt safe the 2 years I lived there. In hindsight, I should have called the police, but I really just tried to convince myself that it was just a misunderstanding. Thankfully, I live somewhere that's actually quite safe with my boyfriend and a very large male roommate, and of course, my little Tito. I really have no idea what I'd do without him. About 5 years ago, our family had a really nasty issue occur. I'm honestly only here today because my cats are the greatest pets I could ever have. I lived with my mother until I was 18 years old. Her family lived nearby and it wasn't uncommon for relatives to often visit us. One of those relatives was my older cousin named Alan. He came by mostly on weekends. Now, Alan was a druggie and a drunk, but I treated him with the same respect and trust that I would anyone else in the family. That is, until one day. He came over to visit my mom and get some food. I'm sitting at the kitchen table doing homework. He walks over to talk to me and my kitten Luna totally flips out. Now, this is a 2-month-old little black cat, sweetest thing ever. Doesn't scratch, bite, or anything aggressive. She's absolutely perfect. But when Alan approaches, she lets out this unholy growl. The only thing I can really compare it to is a dying cornered animal. It really scared me, and at the time I thought I was going to crap my pants. Alan keeps approaching. Luna, sitting by my feet, suddenly jumps into the table and arches her back. She puffs out her fur and then snarls and shrieks at him. Alan backs off and then leaves without getting his food. Literally 2 minutes after he's gone, she's back to being my little angel. The same thing happened that next week, except this time I'm watching TV on the couch and Luna's in my lap. My other cat Coco is on the armrest. Alan shows up and tries to get near me. This time, however, both of my cats go insane. I was horrified enough myself that I didn't move. Once again, Alan leaves immediately. Flash forward a month later. I'm home alone. Alan knocks on our door and, me being cautious, I answer with the chain on. He's asking me for food and to take a shower. I tell him to come back when my mom is home. He doesn't even get a chance to respond. Luna wiggles out and begins to circle him, growling. He reaches down to grab her and she immediately goes for his hands. He has her for all of 2 seconds before she lets go and runs back inside. I slam the door and then call my mom. She tells me to lock all of the windows and if he knocks again to call the police. I check outside and Alan is now gone. I remain on the alert until my mom gets home. He still isn't back. We go to sleep thinking everything's fine and everything's okay now. Well, that night my mom gets a call from her sister. As it turns out, Alan tried to apparently kidnap my other cousin Kelly. Not only that, the police went to his apartment after the attempt and they found someone in his tub dead. Things come to light after this. My cousin wasn't just a druggie and a drunk. He was also a murderer and a sex trafficker, and my cats knew it. Not the facts, but they sensed what he truly was and protected me. I know I'd be dead if it wasn't for them, or worse. I don't really know where Alan is now. My entire family is on the lookout for him, and not to take him for court, if you know what I mean. Alan, wherever you are out there, please stay the heck away from me. This was about a year ago. I had just gotten married, and though we were rich in love, we were far from rich financially. We lived in a dilapidated old house my husband had borrowed from his late grandparents' estate until we could get on our feet. It was in a bad neighborhood, mind you, but we were surrounded by good people. I actually grew up in a crime-ridden country, and honestly most of the USA, even the bad areas, are heaven for me. So I was very cautious but never completely uncomfortable. My husband is a firefighter, so he works 24 hours at a time. My biggest comfort was our 65-pound pit bull named Candy. She was an absolute sweetheart, and unless you were a squirrel, she would never hurt you. She had taken a liking to me since I moved in, and when my husband started working 24-hour shifts, she would always follow me around the house, never once leaving my side. There was one evening when a really bad storm broke out. They made Candy nervous, so when she started acting up, I didn't really think too much of it. I was playing video games when I heard tapping at the window. Every time I paused the game, it would stop. I assumed it was just a tree hitting the window in the wind, but I decided to switch off the light and the TV in that room just in case. I went to let Candy out for her last potty break for the night. As soon as I opened the back door, she dashed to the right, and to my absolute horror towards the window that the tree was tapping on. I didn't hear anything weird, and the yard was way too dark to see anything. I called her back inside and made sure to lock everything up. I texted my husband, but he was on a call and he didn't get back to me for quite a while. Candy and I went to bed. I must have dozed off for a while, but I was then awoken to Candy growling really low and deep. I'd never heard anything like it before. I knew something was up as soon as I heard it. I stood up and grabbed a machete and stood still listening. Then Candy went ballistic. She went running from window to window throughout the entire house, barking and growling. I was dialing my father-in-law knowing he'd get there before the police, when I then heard a window smash in another bedroom. Candy was there in a flash, although I desperately tried to call her back, afraid that they'd shoot her or hurt her. I then heard a scream and more smashing glass, and then yelling getting further away, then silence. I crept to the window, and there was blood everywhere. Candy had a bloody shirt sleeve in her mouth, and she was wagging her tail sitting in the backyard. She had been nicked jumping out of the broken window, but was otherwise unharmed. My husband and uncle finally arrived a few minutes later. We never called the police. I really wanted to, but they're untrusting of local police in general, and they were also scared Candy would get put down. Needless to say, Candy got a puppuccino and lots of love, and not too long after that experience, we quickly moved. Rescue dogs are truly a special kind of wonderful. The scariest part of this story is their persistence, even though they could surely hear the dog losing it. My theory is that they were a local and they had met Candy out on a walk and had seen how friendly and social she was and hoped that she wouldn't actually attack. The other theory is that my husband had a really crazy ex at the time who was stalking him. She could have told someone that the dog is loud but not aggressive. I guess we'll never really know who it was, but I'm truly thankful for Candy. She's an incredible dog. This happened about 10 or 11 years ago. I was 11 years old at the time. My family had a ground floor flat, and the area that we lived in had just about 24 to 25 families. It was highly secure since it came inside a restricted area for outsiders, so people were rather careless with security issues. No one had a dog in the entire colony, though I really love dogs. A stray dog residing near our colony gave birth to 6 new dogs and kept them in a closeted, shady place very near to our house. We used to always feed the puppies every now and then, even though we didn't adopt them, but we really loved them a lot. It so happened that once one of my father's office mates came to meet him for some work. He had bought ice creams for me and my siblings, but I found his behavior towards me very strange. He would always look at me again and again and gave a weird smile which was very creepy. I felt very uncomfortable, but I was naive, and I thought that maybe the person was just strange by nature, and I dismissed any bad thought. After a few months, it was summer vacation. My dad was out of station and my mom took my older sister for a routine checkup. It was just me and my 5-year-old brother home at the time. I had locked the main door. After some time, somebody rang the bell. I saw through the peephole and it was the same person, my dad's workmate. At first, I got a little freaked out, but then I thought maybe he isn't aware that my parents aren't home. So I told him through the window, which is very near to the main door, that I can't open the door as my parents aren't home. He answered that he's aware and that's why he came. He then told me that he was in love with me. I found this so puke-worthy since I was only 11 years old back then. I refused. He started banging on the door very badly and tried to break the window. I got really scared, but at the time we didn't have any phones, and no one from the neighborhood would be able to hear me if I shouted, since even the nearby houses were also a little far away. My younger brother, who was asleep at the time, then woke up due to all the noise and started crying. I was helpless, and I didn't know what to do. I was on the verge of crying. Then all of the stray dogs started barking at him very profusely. I went to the window and saw all the dogs growling at him, and before they could jump on him, he fastly got on his bike and rode away. After my mom came back, I told her everything that happened. My dad was called immediately, as well as the police. Legal actions were taken against the guy, but I can never thank those dogs enough for what they did. They truly saved us that day. Thank God for animals. Hey everyone, I hope you enjoyed today's video. And if you have your own personal scary story, be sure to submit that to my subreddit at reddit.com/r/southerncannibal or to my email at southerncannibal@gmail.com. I'm always looking for new stories. And before we bring this video to a close, I just want to shout out all of my $5 or more patrons, as well as my $3 or more patrons featured on screen. Shout out to Babe Lincoln, Beth A, Kate E, Katrina T, Celeste S, Ellie S, Emily W, Heather B, Howard R, Jazzy G, Jonathan C, Joseph F, Lori J, Matthew B, Michael G, Steph L, Tammy S, Terry H, 2Eki for You, and Victor R. Thank all of you so much for supporting me on Patreon. I really appreciate it more than you know. And if any of you would like to join these awesome people and also become a patron, head over to my Patreon at patreon.com/southerncannibal. Thank you everyone, and have a good one. And remember to always